how much more optimistic are foreign investors maybe this year compared to this time last year?
Yeah, I wouldn't say materially. I'd say, if I were to put it in percentage terms, probably 30 to 40% more optimistic. I think there are certain industries that there's certain interest in some activities starting to take place. And I think a lot of it obviously hedges off the instability and uncertainty on all the moving parts from an economic and political perspective.
So foreign investors, what kind of foreign investors would be looking to mergers and acquisitions here in South Africa and Africa?
So the majority that we're seeing are trade investors, so not your private equity plays. In many cases, unfortunately, target sizes aren't big enough for international private equity. But definitely, the trade investors are taking a 10 to 15-year view, so they're prepared to live with a different risk profile. And they're still seeing South Africa as a springboard into Africa. So, with that type of view, they're probably prepared to live with a bit more risk than they ordinarily would.
And what sort of industries are we talking?
Definitely the industrials, the tech, pharmaceutical. I think, the industrial side, if we look at 2017, probably had the most in number and value. So looking at an analysis there, I think 92% of value of investments was in the industrial sector, and I think 22% by number.
And what about, what are the problems that foreign investors are still seeing in this economy here?
It's, the feedback in international investors that I've dealt with post-transaction, it's not easy to do business in this environment. I think the biggest challenge is how do you forecast, based on what's happening with the ratings agencies, our currency, uncertainty across the board. But at least it's underpinned by a sense of hope. We know hope isn't a strategy, but at least there's a positive momentum that people are looking at targets again, I'd say, versus a year ago where it was, we're going to wait and see.
Well, even look at some of the mergers and acquisitions we had. We had Barclays and ABSA that sort of fell apart again.
Absolutely.
And there's many more. What happens there?
Yeah, look, again, that's a situation of, I think, when there's pressure economically around the world, everybody re-looks at their strategies, And I think in an environment, if you take an ABSA and Barclays example, there was exponential growth, but there was a lot of cultural differences as well, So you still had ABSA reeling with the historical combination, then you had the new ABSA, and then you had a British shareholder. And interestingly enough, in our experience, the number one driver in a transaction, success or not, is fit. It's not the money.
Yeah.
Because you've got to work together. We forget about that.
You look at Walmart and Massmart.
Yes.
One of the most controversial mergers and acquisitions in the history of South Africa, and everyone seems to have forgotten it was a problem.
Absolutely.
Is that a classic case of fit?
I think it definitely. I think it's always a challenge. How do you really understand that fit? But yeah, it's I think when there's tough, particularly in retail sector, when there's a lot of pressure, I think you clear out the noise and you focus on building, but it never goes away. When the dust settles, it'll come back again and again. You're going to have to deal with it.
What about companies here? Are they hungrier to look for like a big brother from overseas with hard currency, or how's it working in these difficult times?
I'd say yes. I think a lot of it's generational. So I'd say the majority of our clients are probably 55 plus, looking to exit in full. But there's definitely opportunity, for high growth environments with younger entrepreneurs that are looking for a big brother, either to grow domestically, in the region, or potentially look, overseas.
And looking ahead, how much more merger and acquisition activity we like to see here in Africa?
I think a lot more. I think, I was with someone yesterday, and there's a lot of European activity around dedicated funds to invest coming out of Germany, and other European countries. So, again, I don't think that those types of decisions and commitment of capital would take place if there wasn't a positive sentiment around let's buy some good businesses.
And can I ask you a final question? This is something we often have arguments about in the newsroom.
Yes.
A foreign investor sits down with you. What are the first three questions they ask you?
Yeah, so the first thing generally the questions come via telephone before they get on an aeroplane. I think it's really around understanding more the entrepreneur and the business itself, the DNA of the business.
Okay.
That's absolutely critical.
Two?
How much of the business, everything about it, resides with the entrepreneur? So it's all easy, there's succession in theory, but how much is there an over-dependent? And the most common, obviously, is how much does he or she want? Yeah, the million-dollar question.
And regulations and leadership in the country, does that come in?
It does. It does. Ironically, it's generally easier for an international investor to invest or buy a company in South Africa versus local because there's no Comcom and the lot. But definitely, I think depending on the industries, and in many cases, the European environmental laws and the likes, our standards are a little bit lower, so there's some concerns and risk there.
Well, thank